It happened at the end of grace, when dessert plates were cleared and phones were already out. My mother stood, smiling too wide, and handed me an envelope across the table. My father nodded, relieved. My sister angled her camera, whispering for reactions. The room waited. I opened it slowly. A check. A ticket. Laughter thinned. Someone coughed. No one stopped it. I didn't ask why. I didn't refuse. I felt heat rise, then settle. I smiled because silence was safer. I folded the paper neatly, thanked them, and sat back down while eyes stayed on me at that moment. Authority in my family never announced itself. It arrived through tradition, through timing, through who was allowed to speak without being questioned. At that table, authority was my parents' comfort. It was the smooth ending to a holiday. It was my sister's content. The decision had been made before I arrived, before the turkey cooled, before anyone asked if I wanted a future that didn't include them. My father cleared his throat after I sat down. He talked about practicality, about fresh starts, about how some people need space to grow. My mother nodded, eyes fixed on her plate, as if the words were fragile. No one asked me what I needed. The authority in the room had already chosen ease over fairness. It always did. My sister filled the silence with commentary. She framed it as generous. She said I was lucky. She said this would help me find myself. The camera stayed trained on my face, waiting for a crack. Authority thrives on witnesses who prefer spectacle to interruption. No one told her to stop filming. No one told them to stop. This was not new. Growing up, plans were changed in front of me and explained later. College choices were discussed as announcements. When I protested once, quietly, my mother said I was making things uncomfortable. That word became a warning. Discomfort was worse than injustice. I learned to smooth moments before they hardened. I learned to nod. The envelope was simply a more efficient version of the same rule. Remove the problem cleanly. Call it help. Keep the peace. Authority likes solutions that don't require reflection. My parents looked relieved when I smiled. My sister lowered the camera a fraction, disappointed but satisfied. The table breathed again. I thought of the years I had adjusted. I moved home when asked. I left when asked. I loaned money without records and was called difficult when I asked for timelines. At gatherings, I sat where there was room. When family photos were taken, I held bags. None of it was cruel enough to name. All of it was consistent enough to matter. The check rested on the table like proof of reasonableness. The ticket made the message plain. This was not about opportunity. It was about removal. Authority had chosen the cleanest exit for themselves and packaged it as generosity. I watched my parents relax into conversation again, already done with me. I did not argue because arguments give people something to resist. I did not cry because tears invite explanations that change nothing. I folded the papers and placed them in my bag. I thanked them because politeness keeps doors open long enough to leave on your own terms. That night, after leftovers were wrapped and hugs were exchanged, my sister posted a clip. Comments praised my parents. Strangers admired my composure. Authority loves applause. I turned off my phone and sat alone, listening to the quiet settle. The decision had been made public. My response would be private, careful, and final. Patterns reveal themselves when you stop defending each moment. I had spent years calling incidents misunderstandings. Once I stopped, a line appeared. I was the flexible one. The one who could handle it. When my sister needed help, plans shifted. When I needed help, advice arrived instead. Family meetings happened without me, then were summarized. Decisions were presented as updates. I adapted and called it maturity. Money followed the pattern. I covered gaps and was thanked later, quietly. When I asked for records, jokes replaced answers. When I asked again, tension rose. I learned which questions were allowed. I learned to ask fewer. Holidays sharpened the contrast. My sister's stories were told first. Mine were corrected. If I disagreed, my mother said now is not the time. There was never a time. Silence became the price of belonging. I noticed how quickly concern appeared for her reputation. I noticed how slowly it appeared for my safety. When boundaries were crossed, explanations arrived ready-made. Stress. Intentions. Family. The words were soft and firm at once. They closed discussion. The envelope only confirmed what had been rehearsed. I was the expendable one because I was reliable. I filled gaps. I absorbed discomfort. The family functioned because I did. Removing me was efficient. I began preparing long before that dinner. I gathered documents. I changed passwords. I opened an account in my own name. I reviewed leases and beneficiaries. I kept copies off-site. These were not threats. They were insurance. I stopped volunteering information. I answered with facts. I delayed responses. I watched how often my absence caused panic, then annoyance, then adjustment. The pattern resisted, then recalibrated. By the time the check touched my hand, the decision was already made. Not in anger. In accuracy. I understood my role clearly and stepped out of it. I did not need permission. I needed follow-through. I thought about leaving many times, but staying felt safer then. Familiar rules, familiar costs. Even rejection had a routine. Change threatened the story everyone agreed on. If I left quietly, the story would wobble. That fear kept me present. Writing lists and locking doors felt smaller than confronting faces. Yet preparation is a form of speech. It says no without inviting debate. It waits. It holds. And when the moment comes, it moves. I chose readiness over approval, patience over noise, timing over impulse, every single careful day. The boundary was crossed the morning after Thanksgiving. I checked my phone and saw my sister had uploaded a longer clip. The caption praised generosity and resilience. My face was frozen mid-smile. Comments speculated about why I was being sent away. No one asked me. I realized consent had been assumed again. My image, my story, my exit, all repackaged. The check was already photographed. The ticket details were visible. I understood then that the gift was also leverage, proof I could be bought out of the family narrative. I didn't comment. I documented. I saved timestamps. I downloaded the video and archived messages that framed the decision as mutual. I contacted a lawyer for a brief consult and asked specific questions about funds, recordings, and rights. I was calm. The answers were clear. I endorsed the check that afternoon and deposited it into an account my parents could not touch. I did not spend it. I converted the ticket to credit in my name and requested confirmation in writing. Small clicks. Clear steps. Inside, something ended. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I stopped hoping the camera would turn off. Belonging that requires erasure is not belonging. I did not announce this shift. I felt it settle, firm and quiet. When my mother called to ask if I was grateful, I said thank you and nothing more. When my sister asked for another clip, I said I was busy. I let silence do what arguments never had. I was finished negotiating my place. I had one, and it would not be filmed. That night I packed slowly, labeling folders, backing files, and setting reminders, knowing the next steps would unfold without witnesses, without permission, and without the noise that once kept me small and safely beyond their reach. Withdrawal looked ordinary. I booked a short stay under my own name. I redirected mail. I updated beneficiaries. I informed my employer of a temporary relocation and received a simple acknowledgement. Process prefers clarity. Messages arrived in waves. My parents asked when I would use the ticket. My sister asked why engagement dropped. I answered neither. The video disappeared after a report and a quiet request. No apology followed. Explanations appeared instead, shared among themselves. I was not included. The check remained untouched until my lawyer confirmed there were no strings. Then it moved, cleanly, into savings earmarked for housing. I signed a lease. I bought a chair. I slept without bracing for the next announcement. At Christmas, a card arrived addressed carefully, without warmth. I placed it in a drawer. Friends asked questions I answered simply. Distance did the rest. The family adjusted their story to my absence. It sounded thinner without my reactions to frame it. My sister posted less. My parents spoke of peace. Authority settled into a new arrangement that no longer required my compliance. I did not correct anything. I let time test their version. Weeks turned into routines. Workdays ended quietly. Mornings opened without commentary. I learned how dignity feels when it's not performed. It feels like space. Nothing dramatic closed the chapter. There was no scene to reclaim. The consequences arrived on schedule. Fewer invitations. Fewer assumptions. Clearer boundaries. I moved forward with what was mine, legally and otherwise. I did not disappear. I relocated my attention. The money became shelter. The silence became rest. The camera found another subject. I remained unrecorded, intact, and unafraid to keep living without an audience. The future did not require an ending. It required continuity. I continued, steady, unnamed, choosing days that did not ask me to smile through removal again.